This is part 3 of ranking the most evil laws in the 48 Laws of Power. This is one of the most toxic books that teaches you how to manipulate people and includes people being toxic and manipulative. So if you feel uncomfortable with that, I don't know what to tell you, but keep watching the video. We're gonna be ranking the laws from you're good to pure evil. Let's begin. We've reached law number 18. Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. This is the law of not being emo. Yes, that is me. Let me explain. So this guy is powerful AF. He is pretty much the first emperor of China simply because he literally created China. Before he became ruler, China was made of multiple kingdoms that were fighting with each other, but he came and unified them. But not only that, he also set the language of the country, the laws, and he even set the sizes of the wheels of the carts in the country itself. But he had a big problem. Everybody was starting to hate him because before he became emperor, there was this philosopher called Confucius, and his ideas were almost taken as a religion by the Chinese people. But these same ideas threatened the emperor's rule. So he literally beheaded anybody who would quote Confucius and also burned all of his writings and teachings, and he pretty much erased him from existence. And that made him hated. And also, before he unified China, it was pretty much ruled by multiple families that would keep the rule within their families and would not give it to anybody else. So he was like, yo, I'm the emperor now, and he made the government centralized. He literally moved 120,000 people from those families to watch them closely in the capital. So you can start to see why he would be paranoid. These people have been ruling China for hundreds of years, and this guy comes in and he's like, I'm the captain now. So because of this paranoia, he started retreating into his fortress more and hiding. He slept in a different room every single night, and while in his palace, he only traveled in underground tunnels and made sure nobody ever saw him. If someone were to see him, he would literally have him beheaded, just like John Cena. He became paranoid and stopped trusting people, even his advisors and closest people, and even his family, and he retreated and stepped away from being around people so much that his ministers would start acting policies without his approval or even his knowledge. He basically became emperor only by name. And eventually, when he was out of his palace trying to find the elixir to immortality, he visited Brian Johnson. He ended up getting poisoned. He died alone and nobody even knew about his death. His body was literally taken back to the palace with a cart full of fish so that it could cover the smell. He was most likely poisoned by the ministers themselves because of how powerful they became because of his isolation. So the most powerful Chinese emperor who literally unified China died because he pretty much isolated himself from everyone around him, all the news, and he let other people rule his empire because he was too afraid of being killed or seen. So the lesson from this is that power depends on being connected to the world, not hiding from it. We think that when we have problems with people and we villainize them in our heads and stay away from them, that this can actually benefit us, but it actually cuts us off and actually entices them to treat us worse. If you've ever wondered why some rich people lack perspective and relatability, more often than not, it is because they have disconnected themselves with the real world, with real people and how they speak. They lose perspective. Another lesson that we can learn from this is that you have to guard your sense of proportion or relativity. There was a famous painter that was hired to decorate a chapel in Florence. And this guy wanted to create a masterpiece. So he pretty much isolated himself for 11 years. He never let anyone enter the chapel, and he was too paranoid that people are gonna steal his work or ideas, and he was cut off from the outside world. And after he died, his artwork didn't survive, but when his friend went to the chapel and looked at it,
what the is this piece of shit?
He described it as chaotic, lacking proportion, and lacking overall structure. So, because he isolated himself from the outside world, he literally lost perspective and forgot how the outside world even looked like. A while back, I was pretty frustrated from Arabic YouTubers in general. I had problems with them copying my video ideas exactly word for word. So I decided that I'm not gonna put any effort into trying to befriend them, and I actually decided to even mute them on social media, thinking that that is going to give me relief because I'm not gonna be seeing them copying me anymore. But eventually what happened is I got isolated from them. I missed sponsorship opportunities because nobody would suggest me because I wasn't anybody's friend. I wasn't invited to any of the events that they were invited to because nobody would think of me when those happened. And in general, I got disconnected from the entire community. When people were talking about a specific social cause, I wasn't even aware of the cause, and I would seem like I was living in my own bubble. So being social is something that is unfortunately unavoidable, and isolation is bad. So I'm gonna put this in you're good. By the way, speaking of staying connected, you know how I make these videos where I travel to countries and talk to people? One thing that would absolutely destroy me is not having internet, especially when I just arrived at the airport and I'm looking for a taxi that's not going to kidnap me. But that's where Saily, the sponsor of today's video, comes in. Saily is just a simple eSIM app that you download to your phone, and it pretty much enables you to have internet with you the entire time when you travel. It doesn't matter where you go because it literally has 190 countries on it. You no longer need to worry about buying from shady sellers or people who are trying to scam you in the airport. You don't need to worry about changing your SIMs in the middle of the airport and losing them. You don't need to wait in line. And you can actually get a global plan and travel to multiple countries without changing anything, only downloading the app. It is amazing when you actually find sponsors that you're actually able to use in real life and recommend to people. And not only that, if you use Ramiroy as your code, you'll get 15% off all of your plans. So, I'm literally getting you the cheapest price. You can scan this QR code or download the Saily app using the first link in the description if you ever travel and need internet and don't want to be kidnapped or wait in line or scammed, and use the code Ramiroy for 15% off of your plan. Thank you so much, Saily, for sponsoring this video. Rule number 19, know who you're dealing with. Do not offend the wrong person. It's very dangerous to ignore this law. There was a guy called Shah Muhammad. Didn't expect me to drop an Arabic name like that. And this guy ruled over a huge empire called the Khwarizm Empire, and he had an army of 200,000 men. But there was another guy that you might know called Genghis Khan, who wanted to become friends with this Shah Muhammad because Shah Muhammad is actually powerful AF. And Genghis Khan is still not the crazy conqueror that we know of today. He was still starting out at this time. So Genghis Khan sends an embassy with the finest goods in the growing Mongol Empire. And with that embassy, he sends a message of peace and nice relationships and telling Shah Muhammad, hey, let's share the Silk Road. But Muhammad didn't know who this Genghis Khan was. He was like, why is this guy talking to me as if he's my equal? I'm literally the most powerful Shah in the entire world. So he ignored Genghis Khan's offer. So Genghis Khan now sends a convoy of 100 camels as a gift, loaded with the best Chinese products. Okay, not products, but goods. This time, before the convoy even reaches Shah Muhammad, a governor called Inalchik takes the gifts and literally kills the merchants in the convoy. So Genghis Khan is like, this has to be a mistake. I'm sure this governor is acting without Muhammad's approval. So he sends a third embassy to Muhammad, and this time he asks for peace, but also asks Muhammad to punish Inalchik for what he did. So of course Muhammad listened. Psych! He actually beheads one of the messengers and shaves the hair of the others and sends them back to Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan is furious and he declares war. He says, you have chosen war. What will happen, and what it is to be, we know not. Only God knows. And even though Genghis Khan is still a noob and he has a smaller army than Shah Muhammad, his men have mastered something new that others haven't, which is to be able to use archery while being on a horse with extreme speeds. And he actually goes to Inalchik. Inalchik.
Hey, stop moving.
He actually goes to the city where Inalchik is governing, the guy who confiscated the 100 camels and killed the merchants, and he literally kills him by pouring melted silver into his eyes and ears. So yeah, he didn't overreact. And later on, Genghis Khan surrounds Samarkand, the city that Shah Muhammad was in, and takes it. And even though Muhammad manages to escape, he dies a year later. Genghis Khan not only managed to get Samarkand, but also the Silk Road that he wanted in the beginning, and pretty much North Asia. So the lesson is to never assume that people are weaker or less important than you. If Shah Muhammad had listened to Genghis Khan's multiple peace offers in the beginning, this would have been avoided. If the guys who killed John Wick's dog didn't assume that John Wick is a normal dude who's weaker than them, they wouldn't have been taught a very valuable lesson. There are certain people who treat powerful people better than they treat normal ones. The problem with only treating powerful and respectable people respectfully and nicely is that you never know who the people you are not treating politely are. And also, you don't know who they will become. This is where the advice of being polite to everybody, including waiters, comes. When I was in Aleppo, Syria, and I first started YouTube over 12 years ago, I was made fun of by a lot of people, and they bullied me a lot. And those same exact people, 12 years later, after social media became so important and being a content creator became popular, came to me asking for advice. Another lesson that can be learned from this is to improve your ability to detect insecure people. When you offend people who are secure, they're gonna take it lightly and they're gonna forget about it like a minute later. But if you offend someone who's insecure, they will never forget it. They might resent you and try to get revenge from you. So, because this teaches you to treat everybody respectfully and equally, this is gonna be ranked as you're good. Rule number 20, do not commit to anyone. If you want to improve your dating life and increase your attraction, this is the rule for you. Queen Elizabeth was single AF. They didn't have Tinder back then, so. She was constantly being approached by nobles who wanted to marry her, but Queen Elizabeth knew that if she marries the king or prince of one country, she might gain the enemies of that country and they might drag her into unnecessary wars. And she knew that if she married the guy, guys do what guys do and they're gonna pretty much kill their wives so that they can have all the power, and she didn't want that for some reason. I don't know why. But she would never outright say no to them. She would flirt and be mysterious and ambiguous, and people never knew what she wanted. And she always dangled the possibility of marriage with people who she wanted to take favors from. And because she was the queen and she was desirable, and she made sure everybody around her knew that she was a virgin, to the point where her virginity became a symbol, writers and poets would write about her purity, and men were dreaming of winning her. And when I say winning, I mean being in bed with her. She was even being approached by kings and princes from Spain, Sweden, France, and in 1570, France becomes an important ally to England, so she starts flirting with one of the French princes, and she even kisses him in public, dangling the idea of marriage but never actually marrying him. And after they signed the peace treaty between the two countries, she pretty much blocked him on Instagram and stopped talking to him. And apparently she found him physically disgusting, but that didn't stop her from flirting with him apparently. And eventually, Queen Elizabeth literally dies a virgin without marrying anyone, but her actions, and when I say actions, I mean flirting with people, literally made England successful and peaceful while she was running it. So she basically managed to get the benefits from people without getting the negatives. She hinted, she was always mysterious and made men believe that she was interested in them, but she actually never committed to anyone in the end. In the Rational Male book, which is one of the books that, in my opinion, originated the red pill, there's a theory called plate theory, which basically says that you should always be talking to multiple girls at the same time without actually committing or being exclusive with any of them. There's a saying that says, a truly powerful man jealously guards his most precious resources, his independence and his ability to maneuver. In other words, his options and his ability to exercise them. The author is basically telling you, as long as you have multiple options, you have all the power, but as soon as you become exclusive with one girl, she's gonna be able to control you because she becomes your only source of, you know what it is. And the author of this book warns you that people are always going to try you to get to commit to them. They're gonna offer you gifts, they're gonna try to do favors for you so that they put you under obligation to make you feel like you owe them something. And this is actually why some people don't like receiving gifts, is because they don't want to feel like the other person is now entitled to something from them because they gave them this gift. There's also an evil side to this rule. For example, if two people were fighting and instead of standing for the side that is actually morally right, you actually ignore it or don't involve yourself because you don't want to commit to a cause that's not yours. So I'm gonna put this in. Understandable. Have a nice day. Rule 21. Play a sucker to catch a sucker. Seem dumber than your mark. Warning, this is going to be an evil law, but it's a nice story. There were a couple of miners that actually managed to discover a mine full of diamonds. But these guys were simpletons. They're not going to be able to mine the whole thing by themselves. So they contacted the US financier called Harpending. They showed him the diamonds that they managed to extract from the mine by using a mining expert that actually went with them like a couple of weeks ago and extracted the diamonds himself. And they were able to estimate the diamonds to be at least $1 million. So Harpending literally saw dollar signs in his eyes, but he first didn't believe them, and he asked them to come with him to New York so that another guy called Charles Tiffany would inspect the diamonds and see if they're real. But the simpletons felt a bit skeptical. They thought that maybe this could be a trap, that these city slickers, as the book says, might be scamming them to try to get to the mine themselves. So to make them feel comfortable, the Harpending team offered them $100,000 up front and $300,000 put in escrow escrow that they were gonna get if the deal went through with an additional $300,000. Of course, the simpletons had already agreed after they heard the $100,000, and they were like, so they all went to New York to have a meeting, and in the meeting there were the richest people in New York who were probably going to invest in this mine. The only people who were not in the meeting were the simpletons. Apparently they were tourists and they had never been to New York before, so they actually went sightseeing, which is understandable. But Harpending manages to get what he wants, which is to actually inspect the diamonds and the quality. And Tiffany actually tells them these diamonds are worth a lot. But Harpending asks the simpletons for one last request before he actually gives them all the money, and he says, let me send one expert with you guys to the mine, and I want him to actually dig up diamonds with his own hands. The simpletons had nothing to hide, so they were like, okay. But when they actually went to the mine, they actually drove in circles and tried to make sure that the expert doesn't memorize the way to the mine. And when they actually got there, the expert started digging, and he was actually able to find emeralds, rubies, sapphires, and most of all, he managed to find a lot of diamonds. And he told Harpending, I can pretty much extract like $1 million worth of diamonds a month if we actually get this mine. You better buy it now. This time Harpending was sure AF. He knows that this mine is full of diamonds. So he starts calling investors and raising money. He formed $1 million corporation and started furnishing offices in New York. But he had one problem. He had to get rid of the simpletons because he doesn't want to share money with them. And because they were simpletons who didn't know any better, he actually managed to convince them to sell the coordinates to the actual mine for only $700,000, which was a lot of money, but nowhere near $1 million a month that they were going to be able to extract from the mine. So the simpletons agreed and they signed the contract. And when Harpending and his company actually went to the mine, they couldn't find one single diamond. They found out that it was all a scam. In the beginning, the simpletons had saved money from their mining careers in the past, and they bought the initial diamonds. They salted the mine with the diamonds, and when the first expert dug them up, he was convinced that it was from the mine. And later on, when they used all of that to get Harpending's interest and get his $100,000 to keep them feeling comfortable, they actually went to Amsterdam, bought diamonds with that $100,000, and went back to the mine to sprinkle the diamonds in it. And when Harpending's expert came to the mine, he found the same diamonds that they actually bought from Amsterdam. And they had initially not attended the meeting in New York so that they wouldn't get a lot of scrutiny, people wouldn't ask them questions they wouldn't be able to answer. And the best part is their scam was legal. They were not responsible for Harpending's company not being able to find diamonds. It could have been that the mine doesn't have any diamonds anymore. So they managed to take the $700,000 risk-free. The biggest reason this scam worked and they managed to fool so many people is because they seemed like simpletons who didn't know any better. They intentionally wore mismatching clothes and dressed 2 sizes too small or too big to look dumber than they are and to present an image that is not real. So the lesson from this is that people don't like feeling like they are stupider than the next person. And if you make them feel smarter than you, you actually lower their guard and they never suspect you pulling scams on them. If you have a lot of pride and ego and you want to be respected, flaunt your intelligence. But if you want to seem unthreatening and unpredictable, it is smarter to hide how clever you are. If you watch Saul Goodman, amazing show by the way, he was able to pull a con or scam so many people simply by pretending to be dumb. He's walking with a random guy that he just met at the bar that he's about to scam, and he sees his friend that is acting as if he's passed out from being drunk. Saul Goodman takes his Rolex, acting as if he doesn't know how expensive it is, and he manages to get the guy who is scamming to pay him money to take it, acting as if he's the one who got scammed because he only got paid a small amount of money for a watch that is very expensive. But the guy doesn't even know that the Rolex is fake and it's not worth that much money. So he's literally acting like a dumbass, not caring about his pride and how he's seen by this guy because he's looking at a different goal, not to be respected by this guy, but to make money from him and scam him. In general, when people know that you're smart, it's very hard for you to fool people. But if you act innocent, young, naive, people let their guard down and you can actually get away with a lot more things. So for me, this is easily going into pure evil. Use the surrender tactic. Transform weakness into power. This law teaches you how to get away from trouble when others get blacklisted for the same thing. There was a German writer called Bertolt Brecht. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name. I hope I don't have any German audience. Anyways, Brecht was a known communist. All of his novels, all of his writings reflected communist ideas. But Brecht was pretty unlucky because Hitler literally came to power when he was in Germany. Germany, and Hitler is literally the opposite of communism. He had fascism, so Brecht pretty much became a marked man. He is now in danger. So he actually fled to the US and he joined Hollywood. He wrote a lot of anti-capitalist screenplays, aka communist screenplays, but let's just say he wasn't very successful. So he decided to leave the US. But unfortunately for him, just before he was able to leave the US decided to investigate people who were writing about communist ideas. Because after the World War II, they had just become enemies with Russia, who was communist. They were trying to eradicate all communist ideas in the US because they were afraid that people are going to be influenced by watching movies and reading.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist.
So Brecht became one of the 19 people called the Hollywood 19, who were going to be investigated by a committee called the UAUE. By a committee called the UAHU. Why do I keep forgetting the name? Fuck. The committee is called HUAC. Anyways, these 19 guys had a meeting and they were deciding how they were gonna fight with the HUAC. Hell yeah. Everybody was saying that they were going to fight aggressively. They were going to talk about how communism is not a bad thing and how it's against the constitution for them to be investigated and that they have all the right to talk. But Brecht was the only person who was against that. He said to himself, why would you guys fight with them and lose everything? Why not just show them that you have surrendered, that you don't believe in these ideas anymore? But the other 18 guys didn't listen to him. So on October 1947, he was the only guy of the 19 who was super cooperative. Unlike the other Karens, he wore a suit and he smoked a cigar because he knew that the guy from the committee liked cigars. He was calm, polite, and he even made jokes. And his strategy was to give vague answers. And when he was asked about being a communist, instead of saying, yes, I should have the right to be a communist, he denied it, which was technically true. And when he was cornered and directly asked if he ever wrote revolutionary plays, this is what he said.
I have written a number of poems and songs and plays in the fight against Hitler, and of course they can be considered therefore as revolutionary.
So he redirected the meaning. He said that the poems were about Hitler, not about the US, and that yes, they could be revolutionary, but that he was against the fascist government, not against the US. So contrast that with the other 18 who tried to fight with the committee. This guy was able to disarm the committee to the point where they thanked him and they even offered to help him with immigration if anybody had an issue with him traveling. And the next day, he left the US and never came back. But the other guys of the Hollywood 19 who were super confrontational and tried to defend themselves got blacklisted, and some of them went to jail and they lost years of work. So the lesson is, surrender is sometimes a strategy. It's not always submission. You put your pride to the side and start thinking about the future. But another and more tangible lesson from this is to learn how to admit and accept your mistakes. Most people don't admit their mistakes because they have too much pride. They are afraid that if they admit their mistakes, the other person is gonna think lesser of them. But in reality, admitting your mistakes enables you to show reform. It puts you on the same side of the person who's against you. The most well-received YouTuber apologies are the ones where the YouTubers actually admit that they have made a mistake and show that they want to change from now on. It's not the ones that are defensive and double down on their mistake. The author talks about a small island called Melos that was loyal to Sparta. When the Athenians demanded them to surrender and that they would actually let them live, they actually refused. They said that justice is important, Sparta is going to help them, the gods are on their side. They just refused to surrender. And even though the Athenians warned them, honor is often what brings men to ruin, the Melians still refused to surrender. The Athenians killed all Melian men of military age, sold the women and children as slaves, and only a few handful of Melians actually survived. So one of the smart things you can do in life is to know when to put your pride aside and to actually surrender and not fight a lost cause. So that's going into the understandable. Have a nice day. Law 23. Concentrate your forces. This is one of the laws that made me reach 1 million subscribers on YouTube and greatly helped me into achieving my dream. Back to China in the 6th century BC, the king of the kingdom of Wu was raging wars left and right, and he was actually successful. He was making his kingdom stronger, bigger, and more powerful. But eventually, the war bogged down. If he won a battle on one side, he would lose another on the other. And his chief minister and advisor called Wu Tsiu, I don't know who to apologize for if I mispronounced that name. This guy warned the king. He told him the kingdom of Yue was beginning to notice how divided the Wu kingdom is and that it has a weak point to the south. But the king of Wu laughed at him. He was like, bro, shut up. They're not gonna attack us. So later on, Wu Tsiu, the advisor, actually sent his son to a different kingdom for safety because he thought that these guys are gonna freaking come and destroy this kingdom and the king is too dumb to notice it. So he was like, at least I'm gonna protect my son. So the king of Wu knows about this and he feels betrayed. He's like, you sending your son to safety shows that you don't actually trust my wisdom and intuition. And he's like, the only way I can forgive you is by you actually killing yourself. So the advisor actually takes a knife and puts it in his chest, but as he dies, he says, "Tear out my eyes, O king, and fix them on the gate of Wu, so that I may see the triumphant entry of Yue." He's like, I've never been so sure about anything in my life. You guys are gonna freaking get destroyed by Yue in the future. And he literally asked him to take out his eyes and put them on the gate so that he could actually see the army of Yue come and freaking 360 no-scope this guy. And as he predicted, a few years later, the Yue army actually managed to breach the city of Wu and surround the palace where the king of Wu was. The king of Wu, surrounded by guys who were about to rip a pepperoni his ass, remembered the words of his minister, felt the eyes of his minister watching him in disgrace, and he killed himself while covering his face so that he doesn't come face to face with his minister in the next world. So the reason the Wu kingdom was defeated is because the Wu king was too greedy. He wanted to conquer all the land, but by doing so, he stretched his army out too thin and became vulnerable. The author talks about the Roman Empire and how they stretched themselves to encompass vast territories, but making themselves vulnerable to attacks. At the same time, we all have limited time and energy in our days, and if we spread our energy and time out to too many things, we end up achieving nothing. One of the most important things that I learned is that you don't actually achieve your goal by saying yes to opportunities, but by saying no to things that aren't your goal, by eliminating things that are taking more of your time and energy. Here's a quote from Mr. Beast.
Which business outside of the main channel are you most excited about?
No, I would give it all up for the main channel. You gotta have laser-like focus. If you lose focus and you get too scatterbrained, then that's how you just fall off. Or study big YouTubers. It happens time and time and time again. They get big, they start side projects, they lose focus, their channel falls off, and then all that stuff fades away with it. You gotta be focused. At the end of the day, that's what matters. Main channel, Mr. Beast, and all this other stuff supports it.
For me personally, I know for a fact that I can reach 1 million followers on Instagram if I spend a lot of time on it. I know how to create viral videos that get me thousands of followers, but I choose not to because my goal is to make YouTube videos and to become big on YouTube. And that's where I devote most of my time in. It's not that I can't grow on Instagram, it's that I have limited time and energy. So this is definitely going into you're good. Hope you guys learned something in this video, and don't forget to download Saley and get 15% off your plan using the code RamiRoy. And I'll see you in the next video.